Silent No More, The Story of the Justice Bell by Holly Holst. Not long ago, women across the United States fought for the right to vote. They wanted to be included in laws made by the government. For a long time, girls could not go to the same schools or study all the same subjects as boys. Women could not work the same jobs as men, and when they did, they were paid less money. When women were paid for working, the money went to their fathers or husbands. They could not make many decisions to shape their lives. They had to obey laws and rules that didn't seem fair to them. There was very little they could do to change this. Women could not vote. Voting is how people participate in their government. People can vote on laws or for people to make laws, such as the president here in the United States. The right to vote is known as suffrage. Long ago, only men were allowed to vote. Some women in our history worked hard to change this, and some men agreed with them. Men and women, known as suffragists, worked for a long time to gain women's suffrage. They were up against other men and women who didn't believe women should have the right to vote. Women tried everything they could think of. They gave speeches, wrote newspapers, formed conventions, marched in parades, and petitioned the government. In the United States, the government is not easy to change. There are two ways to change voting rights. Individual states, such as Pennsylvania, can change laws to allow women to vote, or the United States government could change laws and allow women to vote. It is hard work changing a government. It can take many years. It takes strength and courage. In 1915, the government in the state of Pennsylvania considered allowing women to vote. In order for women to win the right to vote in Pennsylvania, voting men would have to support it. It was an uphill battle to convince thousands of voting men to allow women the right to vote. Women had a hard enough time convincing other women they should have the right to vote. In Pennsylvania, a woman named Catherine Rauschenberger decided women needed a symbol to announce their place in history. The most well-known symbol in Pennsylvania for freedom at the time was the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. The Liberty Bell rang during the American Revolution to announce freedom for the colonists who formed the United States. Catherine thought women should have their own bell to announce their freedom as well. Without a vote in government, women had no voice and were silent. Catherine decided to have a women's Liberty Bell made, and she paid for it herself. It was the same size as the famous Liberty Bell. It included the same quote, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." It also included the words, "Establish justice." To Catherine, women being allowed to vote was a matter of justice. It seemed the only way the government could be fair to all people. She decided to call her women's Liberty Bell the Justice Bell. Until the Justice Bell could proclaim liberty for women, it was chained silent. This symbolized women not having a voice in government. Catherine Rauschenberger worked with other suffragists in Pennsylvania to organize a statewide tour for the Justice Bell. They took it to every county in the state. That's 67 counties. The Justice Bell traveled on a specially made truck to cities and towns all over. Women stood up on the truck like a stage at every stop and spoke to large crowds of people who gathered to see them. Newspaper reporters wrote stories at every stop. At this time, it was very strange for women to do so much public speaking. These women were brave because a lot of people did not agree with them. They never knew who in the crowd would support them and who might not. They were very brave, and along the way, they gathered support. In Conshohocken, the Justice Bell was welcomed by resident Elizabeth Collins on her 25th wedding anniversary. At a rally near her house, suffragists demanded the right to vote so that women everywhere could be paid the same and treated equally to men in the workplace. The next day, the Justice Bell traveled to Philadelphia for a huge parade, just weeks before Election Day. By the end of the tour, people all over the state had adopted the suffragists' favorite color, yellow. Homes were decorated in yellow drapes. Gardens were filled with yellow flowers. Suffragists hoped the more yellow people saw, the more they'd believe women should have the right to vote. On Election Day in 1915, women's suffrage did not win. Not enough voters came out to support it. The suffragists did not give up. They knew they had gained enough support on the Justice Bell tour to keep fighting for women's right to vote. Many people changed their minds about women voting. Many suffragists had already decided an amendment to the Constitution of the United States was needed to give all women in every state the right to vote. The Justice Bell had become so famous that a month after the failed election in Pennsylvania, suffragists in Washington, D.C. asked if it could be used in a parade. Then suffragists in Chicago wanted to use the Justice Bell in a parade. The Justice Bell became a famous symbol for the suffragist movement all across the United States. Women grew stronger and more courageous by not giving up. It took 5 more years for women to win the right to vote in the United States. Finally, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was added to the United States Constitution, which says, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." In winning the right to vote, women could finally work to change the laws and rules that seemed unfair to them. It was a big first step to gain equality. Celebrations were held across the country. In Philadelphia, the Justice Bell was part of a big celebration on Independence Square, the home of the original Liberty Bell. Catherine Rauschenberger was there to help take the chains off the Justice Bell. She delivered a speech to a large crowd. She decided to have her niece, also named Catherine, ring the Justice Bell for the first time. This showed that suffragists had really been fighting for girls who were women of the future. With a few swift tugs, the Justice Bell was released from silence. Women finally had their place in history, thanks to their own Liberty Bell. Women fought so that girls could grow up in a world more free and be treated more equally. We are still working hard, courageous and strong, to fight for equality today. Today, you can visit the Justice Bell at Washington Memorial Chapel near Valley Forge National Historical Park. Catherine Rauschenberger left it in her will to be cared for so that all people could learn how women won the right to vote. At the end of her life, Catherine thought the Justice Bell symbolized the completion of democracy. But is she right? How could we today make democracy more complete?